I think I've said this somewhere in my writings to all of you. Let me just reiterate. I'm not writing off taking the Senate back in 2 years, but I think that's a bigger challenge than winning back the House. And so I would focus attention on finding really good candidates. I had a lot of discussions with the outgoing chair of the party about candidates, and I've seen too many instances. You know, this is not open to the press. I don't think the press are here. I've seen too many instances, quite frankly, where we've found somebody to run as a Democrat. They had no idea about the party, no idea about the philosophy of the party, no idea about what our perspective really is. And so they've run, and even when we've won and been successful, it's helped us in electing constitutional officers. But to tell you the truth, they've been terrible legislators. They have no idea, you know, anything about party discipline. I'm not saying we can march lockstep with one another on every issue, but in too many instances, we've elected people who think and act more like Republicans. I think we got to move away from that. I don't know if that answers the question, but I certainly made a stab at it. And I'm willing to talk to anybody after we're all done with this about any of these issues.
Next up, Melissa.
We kind of talked about staff, but I think one of the huge holes that we have in the party is we don't have a political director. There are 151 House races, there are 35 Senate races, and there are term limits on all of those seats. Every single one of those districts is unique unto itself, and we don't have somebody sitting down, breaking down those districts, and saying, this is what's important in this district. We're not even doing polling to try and figure out what's important in each district. We're depending on Rasmussen, who is a conservative neocon who openly talks about being a Republican, and yet that's the polling data we use to determine our voting universes when we try and get out our vote. There's a problem with that. So to get it back, start with polling, start with breaking down the races and figuring out which of our messages works in which area, which candidate has the story that needs to be effective in that district when we're out there looking for, you know, I'm going to shoot myself in the foot here. And it's ironic because one of my, I received a medal from the United States Army for diplomatic services in Desert Storm. I am so sick and tired of people saying we gotta find good candidates. Like the implication is that we've had bad candidates. I'm sorry, Patsy Crockett was a damn good candidate, didn't need to lose. She lost because we didn't have the mechanisms to respond to Karl Rove dumping 100,000 into a race. How do we get it back? We go in prepared, and we figure out our voter universes, and we do a better job at getting out our vote and identifying who our base is and getting them to the polls. And that means a lot of painstaking analysis and breakdown of each and every one of our 186 different districts. And that's not even taking on the federal races. Sorry, thank you very much.
Stephanie.
I agree with a lot of what's been said by everybody. I think that comes back to a really critical point though, and it's a lot of this is fundraising. We have got to have the money, and I agree with Melissa that you can have the best candidate in the world. If you don't have the money to fight a good fight, you're probably not going to win that race. So I have raised a lot of money in the past. As I said in my opening statement, I've raised over $1 million in 2 consecutive campaigns. I raised over $1 million in the anti-Pulaski campaign in 2004 and in 2006 in the anti-Tabor campaign. And I worked with individual donors, I worked with groups, and I worked with, I worked on Tom's race, I worked with some national donors as well. I was the political director for Tom as well, for Tom Allen's race. And anyway, so sorry to go off on that, the fundraising piece is very, very important. And I think too, all politics is local again. We've got to go into the communities and talk to people and get good candidates interested in running. Frankly, it's such a toxic atmosphere out there. As a candidate, people get attacked, and it's just not a fun thing to do. Go put yourself out there because you're going to be criticized. So we have to go find these courageous souls to come out and help us win those seats back. Thanks.
And Ben.
the job of winning back the House and the Senate does start with recruiting. It requires recruiting good candidates, but this is something I've heard from many of you over the last few weeks. It requires finding good people that we'll also be upfront with them about the amount of time and the commitment that it takes. So they go in with their eyes open about what it takes to run for office. And I think with Janet and myself, we have a good feel for that. Janet's done it herself, and I have run a successful caucus campaign, and we've found good candidates to do that. I think critically, though, we have to strengthen our county and local structures, our county and local committees, to give our local candidates the support. I mean, I just spoke with Mr. Keene before this all started, and he talked about his race in 2004 in Winslow, where he was his own campaign manager, and he didn't have the time to go down to the town hall and collect information about absentee ballots, where his opponent did have somebody like that. Well, that's a function that our local county and town committees ought to be performing, and they can and they should. And it starts with leadership at the top, working with them on plans and setting benchmarks and providing resources, making sure that they have the resources and staff to do all those jobs. It's really the local committees that provide the support for our local candidates who, especially in the clean elections environment, can't afford to have a staff person, even one full-time staff person. So it is about recruiting, but it's also strengthening our local committees so that they can back up our candidates for the House and Senate.